Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. After a deliberate and thorough process, we have confirmed Superintendent Larry Snelling to lead the Chicago Police Department and move it forward to a safer future for the city of Chicago. I want to thank Anthony Driver, Ramel Terry, and the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability for their leadership in forging a democratic path to this selection. I also appreciate Chris Taliaferro, the chair of Chicago City's Council, chair for the Chicago City Council Police and Fire Committee, Brian Hopkins, who is the chair of the Council Committee on Public Safety. We are also joined by Alder people Mosley, Chico, and O'Shea. Thank you all for being here. Superintendent Snelling is a son of Inglewood, is a proven leader who has the experience and the respect of his peers to help ensure the safety and well-being of all residents and address the complex challenges we face related to community safety. Before I express my support and continued support for Superintendent Snelling, I want to also sincerely thank Interim Superintendent Fred Waller for his work and his leadership. Superintendent Waller responded to the call of duty when the city of Chicago needed him the most. He came out of retirement to lead the Chicago Police Department and the city of Chicago through the summer, a time when every facet of our department is tested. Superintendent Waller set the tone for the department at the onset of my administration, and he did it at a very crucial moment for our city. And at this time, I would like to call him up to say a few words, but also recognize his service and his love for the city of Chicago. Superintendent Waller.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much. This is a historic time. I want everyone to remember where they were when Larry Snelling became the superintendent, right? But good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson, and congratulations again, Superintendent Snelling. Leading the Chicago Police Department as superintendent is the honor of a lifetime. And I'm so excited to pass this position on to Superintendent Snelling. I know he's ready for the job, and I'm excited to see his vision for public safety take form. I've seen him grow throughout his career, and he still has the same drive and passion he had as a police officer. I will always be here to support you. As my time as interim superintendent comes to a close, I just want to thank all the men and women of the Chicago Police Department who give so much of themselves to protect the city of Chicago. I also want to thank the Gold Star families. Your grace is inspiring to all of us. The words thank you would never be enough to express the appreciation I and this city have for you. I also want to thank all of our community members, partners, and outreach and street intervention workers who work with us to save lives and create safer neighborhoods across the city. And to my family, especially my wife, your support has meant the world to me. I know it hasn't always been easy, but you are why I've been able to do this. Congratulations again, Superintendent Snelling. You've got this from here. Thank you.
So again, on behalf of the city of Chicago, thank you, Superintendent Waller, for your sacrifice, public service, and dedication to the people of Chicago. We know that you will continue to be a valuable source of support and advice for our department and, of course, its new leadership. Today marks a new day, though, for our city. Superintendent Larry Snelling upholds what I call the 3 C's of leadership: collaboration, compassion, and to make sure we have competency. In his role, Superintendent Snelling will carry out our administration's vision of collaboration across all communities and stakeholders to achieve real safety. He understands as well as anyone that community safety cannot be secured by police alone. Community safety must be a collective effort and responsibility. It takes the full force of government to build a better, stronger, and safer Chicago. It literally takes all city departments and sister agencies, including our police department, working in partnership with business, labor, faith, community organizations, state and federal partners, and the people of Chicago to create lasting peace and safety. Superintendent Snelling also understands the need for compassion and service. He will continue improving the morale in the department by listening to our officers and creating policies that support their mental health and their ability to do their job. He will ensure that police are building trust with residents and serving our communities in a constitutional way, and doing that with compassion and respect. And the third, competency. We already know that Superintendent Snelling is a proven leader with nearly 3 decades of experience with the Chicago Police Department. He has risen through the ranks, starting as a patrol officer until his most recently as serving as chief of the department's Bureau of Counterterrorism. He is deeply rooted in the values of our city. I'm confident in his ability to further unify our police department as well as our communities and help me build a better, stronger, safer Chicago. The challenges we face in this city are complex and multifaceted. Achieving real community safety is in every single neighborhood. It is an enduring mission. It is an incredible responsibility, and we as a city cannot thank Superintendent Snelling enough for answering the call to serve. Thank you, Superintendent Snelling, for stepping up. I look forward to the work that we will do ahead. And now, it is my honor to bring to the podium the new superintendent of the Chicago Police Department, serving the greatest freaking city in the world, Superintendent Snelling. But they don't clap around here. It's really frustrating.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And thank you for that introduction, Mayor Johnson. Also, thank you, Interim Superintendent Fred Waller, for those kind words. I am truly humbled today. As you can see on the floor, the way things went today, I couldn't be more satisfied at the connection that I felt with the council and everyone involved. And I'm excited about where we're going moving forward. Throughout my 3 decades at CPD, I've seen this department change in many ways. As superintendent, there will be more changes. It's going to be necessary to move the department forward and to move our relationships forward with the community that we serve. These changes will prioritize the well-being of the men and women of the department. Changes aimed at building trust and forging stronger partnerships in our communities. Changes to strengthen investigations and bring justice to victims and survivors who we often forget about. Victims and survivors of violent crimes who we often forget about. We have to make that acknowledgement. We have to think about our victims and our survivors of violent crime, the trauma that they deal with on a daily basis, and what happens to someone when they become a victim of these violent crimes. Let's please remember those people, because at CPD moving forward, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to be there for those families. We're going to be there for those people. Through these changes, I promise to hear and listen to everyone across the city. To make our city stronger, we need to do it together. We have to come together. No more time for adversarial relationships. We can agree to disagree, but we all need to come to the table I think we all want the same thing, a safer city. We want a better place for our kids to grow up. And I think we can all come to a consensus on that. No one area of the city is the same, and the solution must be tailored to each specific area if we are going to get to the bottom of what public safety is supposed to be. I'm ready to do this alongside the members of the Chicago Police Department and each one of you here today in our communities. I want to thank Interim Superintendent Fred Waller and his family. Anyone who doesn't know what a toll that this job can take on your family, on you as an individual, but the people who are supporting you behind the scenes, can't say enough about that. And the family members who are supporting Superintendent Fred Waller behind the scenes while he did this job selflessly, I just really want to thank them. You know, I've thanked his wife several times, and thank you again, Keisha Waller. Superintendent Waller, your care and compassion for our city and our department are evident. I'm grateful for your guidance, your mentorship, your leadership, and always being there when I needed you to be there. As I said before, and I'll say it to my last breath, I would not be here without Superintendent Waller. Superintendent Waller saw something in me that, again, I probably didn't even see in myself. I've always thought about doing the right thing, but he always told me, you need to be in a bigger place. And here I am, and thank you for that. I also want to thank Mayor Johnson, and I want to thank Mayor Johnson specifically for this reason, for being a listener. If we don't listen, we don't hear each other. If we don't hear each other, we're not listening to each other. And we never get anywhere if we do that. There's no way we move forward as a team if we don't listen to each other. And Mayor Johnson, I thank you for that leadership. I thank you for listening. I thank you for hearing me. And I thank you that even as the mayor of Chicago, when you don't have to, you listen. You've always been a gentleman. You've always accepted the things that I've said to you. You've always paid attention to those things, and you've always given me feedback on what you think. I can't say enough about that, because moving forward, the mayor understands that as the superintendent of the Chicago Police Department that I have a job to do. I also understand that the mayor has a job to do. And I'm going to support the mayor in the job that he's doing. But at the same time, in order for me to support the mayor, I have to be the superintendent of police. I have to do the job. And I have to do the job in the best way possible for the entire city to be successful. So I'm looking forward to working with you in the future and your administration, Mayor Johnson, because your administration, I have to say, I just can't say enough about them. The support that I felt from that administration, I just can't say enough. So thank you for that. Anthony Driver, President Driver, can't say enough about the way that he has led the commission, the great work that he's done, and he's quite impressive. Also, a young person of Inglewood. So I can't call him the son of Inglewood, I'll just call him the nephew right now. So I can't say enough about the work that you did, and I really appreciate that. Ramel Terry, the job that you guys did on the commission, I just can't say enough. Like I said before, they raked me over the coals. They wanted to make sure that they had the right person for the job. Some stiff competition, great people who put in for superintendent, and again, I can't tell you how blessed I am and how I feel about being here right now amongst all of that competition. So thank you again. But I've got to say one thing before I leave. We talk about collaboration on a daily basis within our police department. We talk about working with community and community groups. This morning, one of our best community leaders that you can ever think of passed away this morning. Her name is Joyce Chapman. Joyce Chapman was a pillar of the South Side. And there wasn't anybody over there who didn't know her name. She could talk to anybody, didn't matter where they were from, what they had done in their past. Joyce Chapman embraced everyone. And when you went to a function that Joyce Chapman put together, not only did you know you were going to have fun, but you also knew you were going to be safe. Joyce Chapman is seriously going to be missed, but I guarantee you she's left some marks behind that people are going to learn from and follow. So for all of the other Joyce Chapmans out there, please continue to do the work that you do, because you leave a great mark on communities, on neighborhoods, and on society as a whole. So I just want to send my condolences to her family, and just all of you, please keep her in your hearts. She was a beautiful human being that brought beauty to this city. With that, thank you.
Okay, this is an opportunity for questions at this time.
Superintendent Snelling, congratulations. Obviously, big challenges ahead of you, especially with what Alderman Hopkins was talking about with the increase in armed robberies, a big armed robbery spree, carjackings. He spoke about there's new thinking that's required. So what kind of new thinking can you bring to the table that can immediately address the situation of the armed robbery spree and carjackings?
So there are several things there. One, we're working on a lot of things already. And I can tell you the Detective Division, along with our officers, are doing really hard work in apprehending these subjects, but also to try to prevent it. Technology is going to be a huge part of this. We have to utilize technology to make sure that we're able to track these individuals. We also have to look at crews, repeat offenders, and we have to now start talking, collaborating with our lawmakers in order to hold people accountable for these types of violent crimes. We all know that robberies could lead to something higher. So we want to make sure that we keep the city safe in this way. We're also going to have teams that we put together just to focus on these particular types of incidents. This will be the focus. So we want to make sure that we keep our community safe.
Superintendent, congratulations and good luck. This afternoon, you apparently had an officer injured during a police pursuit at Peoria and Cermak. What's your position on the city's no chase policy, and do you think officers need additional training on it?
Our officers can always use additional training. Our officers can also use additional equipment. One of the things that we have to understand, and the predicament that our officers are in at this time, is when we look at liability issues when it comes to vehicle pursuits, we think about the sanctity of human life first. So sometimes if we have someone that we're pursuing and they're reckless, and the officer knows that there's a possibility that this person could crash into someone and take someone else's life, that officer makes that decision by weighing the balancing test. You know, is the risk to the public at that time worth attempting to stop this individual? That liability lies on the officer, not the person being pursued, not the person who has committed the crime. So our officers have to worry about several things when that happens. But the first thing that we think about is the preservation of human life.
Yeah, hi, Lee Chung Greco with Cranes. This is a question for both you and the mayor. Obviously, you're aware of the budget shortfall. I'm curious if there are any areas of CPD where you could make cuts, or as you guys like to call them, efficiencies. Are any of the 1,500 vacancies on the table at all for FY24?
Thank you for that question. You know, look, the reason why we're all thrilled about Superintendent Larry Snelling's leadership is because he understands that we have to create a department that is prepared to live in the 21st century. And so the budget and the vacancies in particular, we have an opportunity to imagine how our police departments can ultimately meet the expectations of this moment. Now look, this is a general consensus around the country that the way police departments have been situated historically is not the pathway moving forward. In fact, the type of shortage that you're seeing is not exclusive to the city of Chicago. And as the superintendent has articulated his commitment to mental health support for officers as well as the community at large, these are ways in which we can imagine how vacancies can be positioned to best meet the 21st century demands. Is there anything else you wish to add, Superintendent? Thank you very much.
Since we're on the budget, can I just ask you, Mayor, everybody thinks you're a nice guy. Are you going to have to be a little bit mean when you get into the budget season now?
I didn't know everybody thought I was a nice guy, so that's breaking news. You know, it's interesting. The city of Chicago, and I appreciate the question, the city of Chicago elected me to collaborate and bring people together. That getting things done doesn't require you to be a dictator or harmful. In fact, that style of leadership has led to school closures, mental health clinics being closed, public housing being eroded. And what we're all in agreement with, and this is the city of Chicago as a whole, that the people want a better, stronger, safer Chicago, one that's united, pulling all in the same direction. You know, will we have to make tough decisions? Yes, I'm already making them. And in the midst of making tough decisions, that my administration has been effectively working to listen, as Superintendent Snelling has articulated, and coming to conclusions that we can agree on. Here's the last thing. Trying to solve all of the systemic errors that have taken place over the course of now a generation, decades now, in one budget, not even my Aunt Minnie expects me to work that miracle. And she has high expectations for her nephew. So if my Aunt Minnie can be patient with one budget, moving us in the right direction, I'm confident that the rest of the people of Chicago recognize that we have multiple budgets to bring people together, and then there will be an election where I'll get reelected and we'll keep doing that work.
Craig. And Craig Delamore, WBBM Radio. And this one's for Superintendent Snelling. You've talked a lot about the well-being of the officers, but how far will that and the kind of attention you're putting on us judging officers fairly, how far will that go in turning the morale problems that the police department has had around and stopping the exodus of some people who just felt like it's not a good time to be a police officer?
Well, here, I'll tell you, through civil unrest and COVID, occurring at the same time, officers went through a lot. I was there, I was present, I saw it, especially our younger officers who didn't at the time maybe have the experience to know how to deal with that. These officers didn't only see this with crowds and protesters, they saw it amongst their own family members. And having conversations with them started to understand that. The only thing that officers were looking for in all of this was a little support, someone who could understand what they were going through, someone who would acknowledge that this is actually a really hard job to do at times, and it's difficult, and officers are often faced with making split-second decisions that others have a lifetime to dissect and judge them on. So when I talk about fairness, is to look at every aspect of it. Don't just, read clickbait news articles or listen to the loudest voices who would like to criticize without having the full story. I think officers understand that when they make mistakes that they can and will be held accountable. And I can tell you across the board, most officers and the majority of officers that I've dealt with understood when they've made mistakes that there's an accountability to that. However, whatever the penalty is, it has to be fair. It has to be commensurate with whatever the infraction was. When we have officers who engage in something that's a minor infraction and we want to give them a 30 or 60-day suspension, it's excessive, and what it does is it not only kills morale, but we're taking food off of a table of a person who's trying to keep this city safe. Not that he or she shouldn't be held accountable, but it should be done fairly. And I think when our officers know that and they have that level of support, our officers will be more than willing to stay and continue to work this job.
Hi, Erin Hegarty with the Daily Line. This is also for Superintendent Snelling. If you weren't aware before this, I'm right here. Press conference. Budget season is here, and last year the CCPSA issued a review finding that CPD's spending on public safety was not delivering results for communities, and that the process was not as transparent. The budgeting process was not as transparent as it could be. It's a quick turnaround, but how do you plan to ensure that the money going into CPD's budget is helping Chicagoans?
Well, we have to measure what we're getting for those dollars. And we all know that we're short officers right now. There are times where we utilize overtime to help out, and especially during the summer season where we have multiple events where we need more manpower. And what we're going to do is measure that. Where are we putting people? What do our allocations look like when it comes to manpower? Once we make those proper assessments, then we know where we can trim some things or where we have to beef some things up. So there will be transparency. There's a new administration here. So I'm working under Mayor Johnson now.
Hi, this question is for Mayor Johnson. Maribel Gonzalez with CBS 2. We've seen a lot of we've heard a lot of from residents pushback on housing migrants in their neighborhoods. We've seen police stations saturated, volunteers stretched thin. With all of that said, will Chicago continue to be a welcoming sanctuary city?
Yes. Look, during difficult times, sometimes there are individuals who feel the pressure, and sometimes our values are called into question. We're the city of Chicago, and this mission that the entire country has endured over the last year and a half, has been one that, of course, that has pressed our convictions. But we don't necessarily have to acquiesce to fear because we are being pressed. We're talking thousands of individuals that have arrived here in the city of Chicago since I've become mayor. In the midst of that, we've stood up nearly a new shelter every single week. We've renegotiated a contract that I inherited twice to save on resources. I do appreciate the mutual aid that has leaned in during this moment, but I don't flinch, and people expect me to lead, and I'm doing just that. And There's a tremendous sacrifice that every single level of government has to be prepared to endure. And I was just in Washington, D.C., speaking with President Biden's senior advisor around ways in which we can continue to collaborate to make sure that there are resources for those who are unhoused, those who don't have access to public education that's fully funded, and a host of other dynamics. And we're going to continue to work hard to come up with a solution that works for everyone in the city.
I have one for the superintendent. Thank you. Hey, congratulations.
Thank you.
During your tenure, your long tenure at CPD, have you found ShotSpotter to be an effective policing tool, and do you expect to continue to rely on that technology during your time as superintendent?
Here's what I'll tell you about technology. And we're not looking at one particular company or anything. We're looking for the best possible technology that's going to help us keep the city safe. And I'll end it by saying this. I'm for any technology that is going to save lives.
Hi, Superintendent. Congratulations. I'm Jim Daly with Southside Weekly.
Thank you.
You said that officers who make mistakes will be held accountable, but the penalty has to be fair. Do you generally believe that COPA's process and findings is a fair process for officers? And, if so, can you commit that in the event during your tenure that COPA ever recommends separation for an officer, that you will support that ruling?
Well, to say that right here would be kind of irresponsible. This is something that I would have to review. And I'll tell you right now, if there's something that is a recommendation where I believe that that officer does not belong on this job, of course, absolutely, I would agree with that. Listen, we've all seen, not just here in Chicago, but across the country, not every police officer, not every police officer who's employed by a police department is there faithfully. And if we have officers amongst our ranks who are not here faithfully, and we know they're doing more harm than good, then yes, we want to remove that officer. The reason we want to remove that officer is because the majority of our officers go out there every single day and put their lives on the line. We don't want to protect an officer who does not have the best interests of the city of Chicago and the fellow police officers in mind. So yes, I would absolutely remove that. Now, to the first part of your question, when I talk about fairness in how we judge an officer's actions, we need to be educated on how an officer is trained. There are three things that we need to take into consideration. We need to look at training, the law, and policy, and how those three things come together. Then we need to look at split-second decision-making that an officer is often faced with doing. So once we are educated enough to look at that and look at all facts involved, then I think we can make a better decision and judge how that or what the penalty should be for an officer who has an infraction.
Hi, Superintendent. Heather Sharon, WTTW.
How are you, ma'am?
Only 5% of the consent decree is in full compliance. Another 60% is in preliminary compliance, and 23% is in secondary compliance. What level of full compliance will you be satisfied with on this day in 2024?
Well, here's what I'll tell you. There are several, and this is what needs to be understood about the consent decree and when it comes to those levels of compliance. That first level of compliance can take a very long time. That's policy. The second part is training, which can also take a long time, and only then can we get into full compliance. So I've spoken with the monitors. We've had some very productive conversations about moving forward on this consent decree and trying to get things moved forward a lot quicker. Right now, I can't really give you a percentage, but I would like to see a significant increase between this year and next year at this time. So we will be working hard to move forward on that.
Good afternoon, Superintendent. Sam Charles from the Tribune. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Speaking of judging officers fairly and looking at the full scope of the allegations against them, Do you agree with the FOP's position that officers accused of the most serious misconduct should have the option to have their cases adjudicated by a third-party arbitrator behind closed doors?
Here's what I'll tell you about officers and infractions, punishment. I believe in transparency across the board. I also believe in accountability. But again, transparency and accountability rooted in fairness. So I don't believe that we have anything to hide. If an officer is guilty of an infraction that needs to be held accountable for, there's nothing wrong with transparency on that and the levels of accountability that should be applied.
So that's a no.
I'm sorry?
That's a no. You don't agree with the FOP?
Listen, when I talk about accountability, because this is just a suggestion. This isn't something that's written in stone right now, right? This is up now before arbitrators. Right now, I believe in transparency and accountability. It's that simple. Now, the rest of that, I'll let that play out. Whatever happens, we will have accountability and transparency amongst our ranks and amongst our officers in the Chicago Police Department.
We have time for a couple on-topic questions. You can go first. I have an on-topic question. Mac Lederman with Block Club Chicago. Congratulations, Superintendent.
Thank you.
Last time you spoke to us and throughout the day, you mentioned improving officer wellness to be one of your top priorities. Block Club has reported about the suicide crisis amongst officers and that there are only 11 licensed clinical physicians for the almost 12,000 officers in the police force. Given that this is your top priority, what do you specifically plan to do on day one to start improving the infrastructure for mental health resources?
Well, the first thing we have to do is start looking at time off for officers, time spent with their families. We have to start looking at overtime issues and day off cancellations. Those things, I think, are going to be the start for officers, just to have that time to wind down, spend time with their families. And we would welcome the opportunity to bring in more clinicians to help out. EAP, just expanding the number of people that we have there. So there are two centers, one on the north side and one on the south side, that just opened for officers in dealing with wellness and suicide prevention. So we just need to push our officers more into that direction and show more support.
Alice Yoon of the Tribune. Congratulations, Superintendent, but this question's for the mayor. In terms of the plan to move migrants out of the police stations, obviously Garda World has a history that concerns some immigration advocates. Can you walk us through your administration's decision, how you weighed those concerns when deciding to sign the contract? And what is the deadline to move migrants out of police stations?
Well, we're moving migrants into brick and mortar at a rate that is expedited, right? I mean, we've stood up multiple shelters. We're pretty much averaging a new shelter every single week. And so, as I've said repeatedly, the mission, particularly at this juncture and phase of my administration, is to continue to move people out of police stations. And, as far as this particular contract, my administration has had very thorough conversations with Garda World, and the concerns based upon the allegations that have been provided, we don't and we will never tolerate the violation of anyone's human right, and that is front and center for me, and I'm grateful that we have a collection of people all over this state, because this is a question that was asked earlier. We are a sanctuary state. We are a sanctuary county, a sanctuary city. I believe there are over 500 sanctuary states, counties, and cities around this country. This is a dynamic that we're all working to solve. And, the political dynamics that have provoked this moment, it's incumbent upon all of us to continue our work and the sacrifices that we all have to make to ensure that families get a chance to resettle and really experience comfort here. And so all of those allegations that have been presented. I take into consideration all of those dynamics, but just rest assured that as a city, we will not tolerate any harm or any violations of someone's human rights at any time. So thank you all very much. Thank you. Well done. Thank you. Appreciate it. How about that? Surviving.